Welcome to Creative Vitality Jam Sessions. Here we have intimate conversations with extraordinary dance and theater artists about reimagining creativity and supporting and building community. Creative Vitality Jam Sessions and I walk the walk as allies for justice, for respect, and for equality. Black lives matter. And we must keep walking the walk for change to come. I'm Helen Pickett, and today's guest is Zachery. He is the founder and director of Renegade Performance Group. Andre and I have known each other since 2004. Hey, Andre.
Hey, how are you? Good afternoon, well, good morning still.
Welcome. I'm so happy to see you here on CVJS.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's been a while. In person's been a while.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, quarantine's brought many people together in the digital landscape, so I guess that's pretty good.
I've really enjoyed it. I've seen people I haven't seen in years. I've gotten to talk to people. I've gotten to have conversations. We've gotten to talk about the political. It's been, in a way, of course I'd love to see in person, but I live in Philly now. I'm not, I don't get to New York too soon.
I didn't realize you were in Philadelphia.
Yeah, 2 solid years now, working on the 3rd.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
I miss Brooklyn. I love Brooklyn, but I like Philly a lot. I do. Hey, so first of all, I've actually just said it, but first of all, it's the first question. I like people to see or hear where you are in the world. I just outed it, but go ahead. Where are you?
No problem. I'm currently in Brooklyn, New York, specifically Crown Heights, Brooklyn.
Great, thank you. Before we get into the heart of the interview, so I do have to say, so Andre and I have known each other since, as I said, since 2004. And I taught him improv at the Ailey Fordham program. That's when we first met. And Andre and I would have really great talks after the class about life, about improv, about creativity. And one of the things I learned, Andre, and it stuck with me so long. So I really want to hear your, how you've taken it forward and why you made, what were the correlations? So I'll get to the question now. You studied architecture at Florida A&M, right?
Yes.
For 2 years.
Yes.
Before you made this transformation, this huge life change into dance. Can you speak about that and what was it and how it's informed you?
Yeah, sure. Well, full disclosure, I've been dancing a long time. So my mom put me in dance when I was 4 years old, so I really didn't have a choice about that. But when I went to university, architecture has always been a big part of my life. I grew up in Chicago, Illinois. And so in high school, they had a program called Chicago Summer Business Institute, which also allowed high school students to intern in architecture firms. I was also in an architecture and engineering kind of track during my high school, studying drafting, architectural design, calculus, physics, and stuff like that. And so I interned at 2 architecture firms in high school. And the second firm was actually of a family friend, Ramona Westbrook, who's still a mentor for me today. And I would say entering university and then studying architecture, it was wonderful. And I was still, I still had connections, to working in firms, working literally in professional environments. how to submit proposals, what design was doing, or what design could do. And for me, it was something I was seeing how design really facilitated how people moved in a city or moved in an environment. Um, and it was something that really inspired me, just I guess as a person and as a citizen of just like how the world worked and how it flowed and how you could really have this impact on I guess people's experiences. So dance has always been a part of my life, really. And so when I went to university at Florida A&M, I knew I didn't want to do sports anymore, and I kind of stopped dancing a bit in high school, and so I started dancing again. And long story short, I got a scholarship to Dance State of Harlem through taking classes at Florida State University, which is also in Tallahassee. And so that's how I ended up realizing really what New York was as a city itself. And that really shifted my trajectory and focus on what life possibility could be once I was in New York for that summer of 2001. And I met all these just wonderful, beautiful, inspiring, intelligent artists. And even though working in architecture was great, you still have to kind of show up at a firm every day at a desk, which was, like the design aspect was cool, but being, I guess, like in an office environment, always was just like for me. And Ramona used to always kind of see me kind of like moving at my desk, and she would just be like, "Oh God." She's just like, just go dance, because she knew I was a dancer as well, and like a beautiful mover and stuff like that. And she was really encouraging. She was just like, go to New York, do your thing. And I had a lot of support with that, from her and from other people and my family as well. And so that transition um, into becoming an artist, studying dance, because I honestly didn't even think like, oh yeah, I could always, I could become a dance major. Like, no way. But really, the decision to come to New York and then into the BFA program, understanding the fact of being an artist, and just how multifaceted it could be. Even though I mean, yes, dance, I love dance, but from that onset of me entering Ailey, I really had an interdisciplinary consideration just of what I wanted for myself in my career.
But okay, I shouldn't start with but, I should say and. Mm-hmm. I remember conversations with you about architecture and how that really informed we talked about shape and line and how it informed the improv. And I just remember like these modalities, right? And the intersection, as you said, with your ideas of architecture. I really felt like that was a place that came together, at least for that semester.
Oh no, it definitely did. In more ways than I think you understand how appreciative I was. I think that was one of the only classes, a little bit in some of my composition courses, but that I guess going back to what I was saying earlier, it was probably one of the only classes or really experiences, because it was more of like a creative experience for us, in that we were also then later, building one of William Forsythe's works, rebuilding one of William Forsythe's works, where where we were encouraged to bring our other interests and considerations about the world into the space, because improvisation itself is a multi-dimensional exercise. It's a really kind of total person, not even body, but like your considerations on approach, intersection with your body and with other bodies in space, and how you negotiate that, and really almost exploit that as well, became something that, again, for me, in relating it to architecture, I was really interested in how we were, how I guess design and those considerations can almost exploit space in a really interesting way, and how certain architects took those explorations and really gave a human experience new facilitation. But then it was interesting because even when I was in architect studying history of architecture was a great class. I really appreciated when I was at well, history of architecture one, actually. It was because you had two courses up. I didn't take the second. Um, and even I remember in 2000, the already, my professors were like, look, green architecture. This is what we need. This is what the world has to really, start to embrace at this moment. And so already those were kind of like given to us like right at the forefront. Um, and so I think for me, looking at taking all of those those considerations, and then even going back into my high school years, and then of course, being in Chicago and being of a city that was kind of like really, especially in the latter 20th century, was really reshaped by the Bauhaus and the philosophies of Mies van der Rohe in the city, and how this form follows function really became a something that I was able to then transfer into my movement, and that really became kind of I think that especially that's where we really started to like get deep into the conversation,
because I used to
yeah,
say, sorry, but the form follows function. Absolutely. We used to talk about you never give up the task.
yes,
Right? It's you figuring your body out in the task. You
yeah,
don't shape.
yeah, exactly. And that was and that's something I've definitely kept with me, just as a doer across mediums. So I think that helped me. um it gave me a space, and I think it gave us, as artists, a space to really, I was just saying, it like exploit space. Like it really allowed us to exploit space through forms that we might not have really considered practical or even imaginable, but became really connected to this task and to I don't want to say these goals, but these relationships that we were building in the space, as these really young dancers. But it helped for me, and I hopefully we'll get into this later, but it also helped. That was one of the early areas of helping me unlock this kind of solidity of form. If does that make sense? Of this like concreteness of
Totally
form.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense. And if you want to get into that now, I have a list of questions, but flow.
No, no, yeah. Well,
I love flow.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you. And so, and so as much as, yes, being training, especially at Ailey, the forms were very um ingrained in how, we as dancers were really trained to, yeah, kind of progressed through traditions that had been built through techniques, through philosophies and choreographies, companies. But it, but there has to be room for dissent, and there has to be room for. I know you were just speaking about it earlier, but
Beautifully said.
yeah,
Room for dissent.
yeah, there has to be room for dissent, and there also has to be room for tangent.
Yes.
That even the most powerful rivers, at some point, something will intersect that creates a tangent or a smaller channel that will go somewhere else. I mean, that's literally that, nature does that itself. And so I think that,
I think Frank Gehry.
yeah.
Frank Gehry's architecture is kind of a descent in a way, with all the curves and the lines and the way things I don't know. What do you feel about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, but yes, absolutely. But I also still see a lineage through Antonin Gaudi, and Gaudi's work in Barcelona,
Yes.
definitely to Gehry. But then I can also then look at I get, and this is where I was saying like exploiting. So then we can look at how the architecture of the North Africans and the Moors in coming from the Iberian Peninsula, from North Africa through Portugal and Spain, and how these dome circular formations, what they were doing at, like, because sometimes people are just like, oh, why did they create it like that? But what it is that actually created that was air conditioning, essentially. Like, why they had those domes shaped like that was because it would trap air at the top, and so then it would so if the funnel is here, if the air gets trapped at the top, it's kind of like think of like an upside down tornado inverted. They figured out that, the air will shoot back down, and that creates a more healthy airflow. And so that's why Arabic architecture has many of those spiral roofs, because
Wow.
it was many North African countries are there in the Sahara, and so it's hot.
Yeah.
So and so I guess what I'm saying, and so we think about that spiral, that cyclical motion. So then we fast forward to Gaudi, and so we see Gaudi exploiting that motion, and then
Gehry.
yeah, and then we can get to exactly, and then like, how do we exploit all of this motion in the actual building itself? And so then, so again, it's taking these, but all of that comes from first the function. So the function of it was literally so people could be air conditioned. You know what I mean? It's because it's like, yeah, this is this is architecture that's dating back to the almost like the 400s. And and so then fast forward now, of course, now we have air conditioning, but at its root, it was a function of understanding and trying to master the science of airflow to support human life and human interaction, which allowed then over time, which again took thousands of years.
Yeah, that's right.
Then here we are now, and so we can look at a Gehry and say like, okay, these are the actual. We can actually pull in all of these understandings of
history.
Yes, and history.
And history. It's so important. So. We got some good questions I have to hear from you. But I just want to say also, what you bring up is the importance of history.
Yes.
And not to erase certain parts of history.
Yes.
And say, oh, this is the penultimate, and was like Venus on the half shell. Well, nobody is Venus on the half shell. Nothing is. Right. There is history. There is history behind. Right. So I love the history. I love, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
So let's see here. looking at my notes. So I want to bring this up. I didn't get to this in the intro, and I want to say it. You were recently awarded the Jerome Hill Fellowship, and it looks like that's a 2-year fellowship, and
Yeah.
you have numerous others honors and awards. Does that Jerome Hill Fellowship, just for the people watching who might be interested, is that for a specific work, or is it for your work for Renegade Performance Group? Is it a research thing? What is that?
Yeah, the Jerome Hill Choreographic Fellowship, and thank you. Yes, it was awarded to me in 2019, and it is a 2-year fellowship.
Yeah.
It is both a creative and research fellowship.
Right.
And it was awarded looking at the chronology of my body of work. And it specifically was for, quote, early career artists, but I think they were looking at artists who have been essentially practicing in the field for, quote, practicing, like presenting their works choreographically, kind of at uh, our respective, for those of us who were awarded our respective body of works, um, and from what we wrote in our application about what we want to do next, or where we envision, excuse me, our works moving, and our own trajectory as artists kind of moving forward
Beautiful.
from there.
So
Yeah.
you have an MFA in Performance and Interactive Media Arts, and you have this 2-year history of architecture in university. You have an MFA, a BFA, of course, from the Ailey Fordham program. So the Performance and Interactive Media Arts MFA, in studying your really impressive and beautiful website, you go into film, you go into you discover and work in different performance spaces. You're in proscenium spaces. You have kind of, so talk to me a bit about that. How is that MFA like the architecture? So where did that take you?
Yeah, thank you. I went the Performance and Interactive Media Arts MFA program is at Brooklyn College,
Exactly.
the City University of New York, which is actually like right down the street from me. So grad school was an amazing experience. I'm really grateful to the PIMA program, and wow, it's really kind of so much to say. Is when I started at PIMA, I was excited also because Brooklyn College had a film program.
Yeah.
But at the time, the film program is still not connected to PIMA. But you can build your classes so that you can take, if you wanted to take film classes, you can. It's open. So I kind of crunched my schedule that first semester, and I took a film production class, in addition to all my other PIMA classes. And because I had the time, it was just like, let's go, let's do it. And
I didn't have extra time in my MFA. You're amazing.
Yeah.
I felt like I was like,
I was
get one more writing assignment, I'm going to fall off my chair.
I mean, believe you me, we had a good bit of writing and research, and I felt like I was, the film production class. We kind of went into an intro. Let me just okay. So, in addition to my PIMA classes, the film production class, and also introduced me to like this overview of the history of film. I had a really great instructor and professor. It was great. We worked with stock footage, so we worked with Super 8 Super 8, 16 and 16 millimeter film. So I learned how to use stock. I learned how to like find like about emulsion. And I think we might have been one of the last 2 years of class. I think they stopped using it later because all the production labs to like get your film processed in the city like closed. But anyway, I learned about line producing, executive producer. I learned all about the language and so what I really appreciated about film was that much like PIMA was an MFA program that was collaborative. So all of our projects, not research, I mean that your study was your own, but any practical projects we did were always done in a group, usually 3 or more, but usually 3 was the number. And that was just fantastic because I was actually the only choreographer and dancer in my cohort of PIMA. And then in film, I'm learning inherently about how film is such a collaborative experience. On top of so that's one, and then how to set camera, how to work a set, how to build a set, the importance of pre-production, production, going into post, and what that meant. Those are things that are never taught or rarely just now, really in the last, I would say, 10 years or less, really being taught in dance programs.
I was just going to say that. I agree.
And it has been to the detriment of our entire field. And I don't care. I said what I said. It's been to the detriment of our entire field.
I agree. I had to learn by doing too. I had to learn all this by doing.
And yes. And so I was happy. And again, I said what I said. I'm very happy. When I went to grad school, I did not go to a dance program. Extremely happy about that. I wanted an interdisciplinary program. And I mean, how I even found out about it, I was like, man, because a friend of mine graduated from a program at LIU. And I was like, they were stopping the program. And he was like, oh, but we copied this program from Brooklyn College. I was like, what? And so I, went on the website, immediately got it. And so anyway, got interested. And so then on the other side, so then we have that. So I had that experience in film. Then in our history theory criticism class, which was taught more from a perspective of theater, but was fantastic because the first thing we started to unpack was semiotics, or the understanding and the study of sign and signage and signifiers. And again, that was something that was never taught in dance programs. Like understanding when you do it, as you were just saying, the history. So I was able to link the history of architecture in its function all the way through to now these aesthetics of Gary. And so in theater, that history of reading the sign of like, if we set up a scene similar like to film, and it's just like, okay, we put a bottle of red wine on the table, or we put like a bottle of whiskey, those mean 2 different things.
Yes.
I mean, they might seem, so it's just like, well, who drinks whiskey? Like, is it Irish whiskey? Is it American bourbon? Like you know what I mean? And so why red wine, as opposed to white wine? Like that could mean something totally different, even, all of it. And so that gave you a consideration for these choices that we were making as artists. Again, that was extremely deliberate and forced us to, I don't want to say forced, but really encouraged us to dig deeper into our intentions with a connection, not only to like, so in a sense that it went beyond like, well, I was just feeling that. Like, no, like,
exactly.
What is this intention and choice connected to? Because it has to be connected to these very real instances of our places and points of origin, respectively, the audience that we are speaking to, and then what we really want to ultimately say in the word. And so that first semester alone gave me, it was what I was looking for as an artist.
It's funny,
yeah.
It's funny, Andre, but I also have to just chime in a bit because The MFA I went to with professors Thomas F. DeFrance.
Oh,
I know. He was, and Donna Faye Birchfield. Yeah. I had a history, criticism, and theory class, semiotics, uh, you know, epistemology, all these things that
yeah.
basically I say they kind of blew my barn doors off
Mhm.
and made me realize how important signifiers. It's all everything you've been saying. I'm just chiming in and saying my MFA did a similar thing. It opened up my thought.
Right.
And very important, you just said it, it reaffirmed, because we've talked about this before too, you and I, reaffirmed the importance of intention.
Oof.
Man, that intention and how you build a piece, and yes, how a choreographer literally can, and I do, and you do, it sounds like, but we can have our influence on every part. Yes, we do the before research. Yes, we do the dance steps, but my goodness, how you build. I mean, I'm sure you've realized this along your years now of how many steps it is to build a piece. It certainly is not just steps. It
Oh,
certainly isn't
no,
just production.
no.
It's this thought that I'm just saying,
Earlier,
yes,
you used to
it's just
say that a
wonderful.
lot, and I believe, um, was it Brian Reeder that was also with us,
Right,
as well as,
yes, he too
and,
taught some classes. Yeah. Well, he taught the Forsyth excerpt.
right, right,
And
yes,
Francesca.
yes, and so and I remember when Francesca arrived, Francesca used to always say, the three of you always used to say, you have to move beyond the steps, and you have to take your intention beyond just the steps, and because I mean you all would say, you all can get the steps really easy. Now it has to have an intention beyond the step itself, and so that really stuck with me often for a long time when the three of you all would say that.
Well, I hope, was I, someone, people always say too, what sticks with them with me is never mark your arms.
That always that yes, yes.
That's going to be in my gravestone. Okay, so let's see. The Yeah, we talked about the mini me. Well, a little bit. I want to go back into that because we do talk about reimagining as an artist, and I feel like you are in a state of reimagining. I feel like all of these, you've set up your performance group. I feel when I research it in that way.
Mhm.
And it's that digging and discovering, right? So it in the intricacies of your performance group, um, and the shifts of these, of how, let's say, how they bump up against each other or how they flow with each other, how they redirect. How has this influenced your creativity? I guess I'm going to say in general, for lack of a better word. We've spoken a bit about it, but I'd like to just go a bit more into it because um, there's a lot of intricate detail. You love detail. I remember that. And I see it in your work and I see it on your website. So it's a big question to unpack. Um,
So when setting up the company, and even being intentional about stating, okay, yes, we create work in dance theater for the proscenium stage. Yes, we create work, site-based work, um, on geographies and within, public space and architecture. Yes, we create film and media and technology work. It first of all gave me a clarity in I did it to give myself a clarity rather in how I was working. So in envisioning a project and what I was trying to say and do, it allowed me to kind of be like to have this amount of uncertainty, and that's something I actually I want to work on a little bit more moving forward. Is actually having a little bit, and I remember this actually sometimes too. Is allowing myself to be a little bit more uncertain because sometimes I can be just like but at the same time, it's giving me the opportunity now to say, okay, I'm not quite sure what form this is going to take. Again, going back to this form follows function. But I know I'm trying to say something. I know I'm trying to do this. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, this really needs to be a film. This one needs to be a film. And I can then state and say why. Or it's, okay, now we're grappling with this. Oh no, this needs to be a site-based work. So example of that one, I would say would be my uh, collaborative project, Arteries of a Nation, that I did in 2013. That was Arteries of a Nation was looking at the 150th anniversary of Civil War events
Oh,
that
yeah.
happened in July 1863. We did it in 2013.
Uh-huh.
And so I was looking specifically at events from July 1863, which were the Battle of Gettysburg, the New York City draft riots, and then the 54th Massachusetts Regiment battle at Fort Wagner in South Carolina. And so immediately I knew, well, this needs to be a site-specific work that we do right on the Brooklyn waterfront, looking at the history of, the city itself, connecting it to the draft riots, connecting it to the history of how that was the Brooklyn waterfront was a huge industrial center for Civil War manufacturing and shipping, but then also looking at how the history of New York Harbor itself was a big also slave trading center of enslaved Africans that where cotton was imported from enslaved Africans into the city and docked and then resent. And so it needed to be on a site that where the grounds held this history of that I'm speaking about.
Yeah.
So that's an example of how I couldn't be I wouldn't be able to really say what I was gonna say in a theater.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like that, then it becomes you see what I'm saying? I hope that's clear. It
Oh,
just
totally clear.
it loses so much relevance, impact, and urgency,
And
as like,
agency.
yeah, and right, exactly. And so yes, all of that. And so that's how, but then for me, giving clearly defining those aspects or avenues for myself in which to work, which at times do overlap intentionally, hopefully,
Yeah.
that again gave me then a clarity to explain that way of working for also grant applications, for um, for performers themselves, and for other people to say, oh, so you've intentionally listed these ways in which you're working. So we can follow you. It's like I'm almost kind of like leaving breadcrumbs or kind of like leaving like clues to the maze, like turn left here, go here, and you'll see that, you know what I mean? So it's I mean it's almost maybe I'm doing too much as an artist, I don't know, but it's hopefully just to give some form of clarity so that you can also lose yourself in what hopefully the work and the art is allowing you to experience.
And like you said, lose yourself also in the location,
Thank you. Yes.
right? So you said it. It's just you're losing yourself in the total idea of the piece of the art you're producing.
Mhm.
And then I totally agree. Then a proscenium space, well, it would be, it could be an interesting experiment because it would be a different piece.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Totally understandable, like beautiful. Do you have a do you have a daily inspiration or something that you can tell the CVJS community? Do you have something that hits you, or a few things that hit you that keep you going, perhaps also in this time or any time? Um,
Um, yeah, I mean, this is, I think, the best way to sum it up is that, um, there's a wonderful quote from Shirley Chisholm, former congressional representative Shirley Chisholm from Brooklyn, New York, the first woman and then black woman to run for president of the United States, um, who said service is the um, kind of like the currency that you must pay for living your life. Um, and in that sense, especially for those of us who are of African descent in this diaspora, um, we do like holding our ancestors and like really understanding what they went through is a big responsibility for us and for we as a generation. I was always given that, but then it became a little bit more as we get, you have the blessing, to live your life. You understand how much of that responsibility is indeed not a singular. Um, you can't do it by yourself. It is about really holding and building a community of people. So in a way, I know every time I wake up, my life is not just about me living it for myself alone. It's about my wife. What does she do? You know what I mean? Like, my wife just finished grad school, so
oh,
you better believe, every, during the time, and I was away during her first year because I was teaching a lot. I was teaching at universities and stuff like that. But when I was back home and finally, back here for this her second year, yeah, right. Yeah, you need coffee? All right, great. I'm making pancakes right now. Like, all right, I got the kale coming. Dinner time because she needed to be in her books, her study, her research, and I can't just. I mean, that made me really happy. I love that, but it's because it's furthering her mission, it's furthering her work, and the importance of what she's doing. Me, so going to Pima, getting these skills wasn't just about big up in myself, but I was creating more of a community for people, artists such as like I collaborate with other artists, on their design work, or if they need advice, it's like, okay, cool, I can work with you on this projection design, and let's do something. I've been able to work with theater companies and stuff like that. I'm able to to film, and I have now these skills that are applicable to help other people's visions and work move forward. That I'm really great. I try and sharpen up every year. Just like, oh, let me take a PD course on this one. Okay, they're learning this now. Let me incorporate that for myself. In the sense that it's not just about myself moving forward, but it's how can I help others? How can I help my peers? How can I then give this knowledge to others in a way of skill sharing? And so that ties back into understanding that it is a responsibility um, to to our ancestors to hold the work and the um, and what they went through without hopefully without it being in vain. So yeah, that's kind of what literally wakes me and some other people up every morning to
Yeah.
keep doing what we do.
Yeah, it's the feeling of our, you said it, and we. It's a feeling of that this community that we build
Mm-hmm.
supports, you know, like, I mean, that's one of the platforms of this talk show, to talk with, you know, to get artists out there in the world, and
Yeah.
every and it's not just the artists in the world, it's that everything that goes into you as an artist, right? It's not, again, it's not like I'm waking up and being an artist. I mean, look at your life and how it has brought you here, Andre. It's just extraordinary, you know. I no, I know I'm not rating it. I don't mean it that way, but you know, I have a history with you, and
Yeah.
seeing the growth and the discovery and the passion and the research and the will.
Yeah. Mm.
It's inspiring.
No, thank you.
It's so inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have the last question for you before we go toward the end. Part of this platform, of this interview, is about supporting and building community. What would you like to see shift? What needs to be shifted in terms of building a more equitable community? It's a huge subject, I know, but you know, in the recent, I was listening to you on a panel recently when you were speaking, just like I think last week or 2 weeks ago, and you were speaking about accessibility in theater spaces. But that's one thing I know you spoke about. But what is an equitable community mean?
Oh,
And what are the shifts that can, you know? It's a giant question, I know.
yeah. Okay, I'll try and sum it up. Hmm. Scarce, the mindset of scarcity. And one of the the television shows that we now have time to watch. My wife somehow has time to like save the world, study, and watch bad TV at once. And I'm just like, how do you, Candace? How do you do this? And but so she puts me on mostly like, listen, really. So so she's like, I have this TV show now. I'm just like, okay, fine, I'll watch it. Some I watch, some I'm just like, I can't do it. But one that she got me on was the show Billions. Um, and there was uh, a dialogue between interchange between two of the characters, where one of the characters said, "What you're doing is oversaturating the market with this material and resource." And she's like, "The value of that doesn't come from saturating the market from it. Scarcity is what allows us to retain this high price value." She's like, "We have to keep it at bay. We can't do that." And I was just like, "Oh." Oh, it's a tactic. It's not about the fact that there is not enough. There's plenty. But in order to make sure that this market works for some and doesn't work for others, the tactic of scarcity is employed to one raise well to falsify the notion of value or of like this is like of high value and therefore because it is so scarce you have to make this much to attain. It's really is like no, there is a violent hoarding of it that says only a certain few can get it. So again, the scarcity mindset is not that the earth doesn't have enough resources. It's that there has been like this real complicitness that these resources should be controlled by a select few, instead of really just educating and saying, okay, this is how we all collectively share these resources, and this is what we need to do to make sure that this cycle, recycling and replenishing, regenerate, like literally that's how the earth works. This is like, okay, we do this to take, and then we do this to deposit. And so that's not at all taught or considered from as our education platform. And so when 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 now we have embraced this scarcity mindset, um, it has created a really just vicious place for the world. Um, and so I think that that is an equitable, in my mind, that becomes one of the ways we can, I guess, begin to employ the practices of an equitable society in an equitable place, amongst many other
Many others.
many others. But
It's
yeah,
a beautiful point. The scarcity, it's insidious.
yeah,
I'd like to say, I, I don't think I think we need to start saying more seats at the table, but equal seats at the table. So that scarcity mindset, so it doesn't rest on one person. You know, we have one person at the table, and then everything rests, and that is part of that insidious scarcity mindset, the pressure, the perfectionism that goes along with all of that, right? And you know, it's equal seats at the table, because
yeah,
then the burden is shared
agreed.
amongst all of us. I
Yeah, I mean, and so I guess for me is that, you know, bringing you were just talking about these burdens and these labors. Um, you know, we're looking at these historical labors, um, that, you know, specifically, you know, have been placed on, you know, Black bodies, in this hemisphere, and of people of African descent. And so then we're saying, okay, well then those those actually have been documented as, and I guess what I'm saying, documented not just in terms of just the counting of, you know, of persons and of people, but documented in terms of the, we can look at the bales, the measurements of cotton or whatever stock, or cane, you know, or rice, tobacco, whatever was produced, and we can see its documented labor, versus what was not, again, given as far as humanity to those doing this work. And so we can then say, okay, well, now that we know this, beyond what is old, yes, but also what then needs to be repaired, and how do we also allow this space for reparation. I think when people think of the word reparation, it automatically comes in this form, again, of like this measurement of currency, which is, that's nice. Yeah, great, sure. But then also, as you're saying, there's going to be labor now, because now, you know, people of African, Black people, people of African descent, are, we're figuring out these mechanisms even more, vocally and visibly, of healing mechanisms and healing practices through art, through performance, through, you know, through all these instances that, ironically, we're asking everyone to do in a way that's actually, you know, not oppressive, you know, affirms so many instances of persons full humanity and choices. But that's going to take a lot of work. I think that's the thing. You know, like me, one of the things that, you know, I was able to, when you mentioned grad school, you know, one of the things I had to do was like start to dig into more like, you know, feminist theory, and then really dig into, you know, specifically like Black feminist theory, and then really just and sit with that and sit with it and be like, oh wow, okay, yeah, that's, now I see that word. All right, yeah, I gotta start figuring out how to employ that for myself. And I mean, yeah, right. If I thought that was like somehow like that made me just so much, hopefully, you know, a more aware and conscious, you know, man as a person.
And the daily
Um,
languaging, right? The
and the,
daily
yeah,
language
creative,
that you have to
yeah,
shift, that a person has
yeah,
to shift, that we.
exactly, yeah, and like exactly, and understanding like seeing the labor that, you know, queer artists and queer persons, you know, Black trans persons, their labor that they're doing, and reading it in a way through a different lens, and being like, oh, this is the work you're doing. Okay, yeah, you shouldn't have to do that work alone. You know what I mean? And essentially, I'm just kind of trying to take it back to what you were saying just now. I was just like, no, I need to. There's work for me to do in this, and this is and figuring out. Okay, yeah, I can do. I'm going to be able to do work. Is it cool to do work this way? I can do this. Can I offer that? All right, it helps. All right, cool. Yeah, cool. And then figuring out that exchange, um, and that also becomes like this healing, because at once that's communicative, that's listening, you know, it's bartering there, that, and that becomes the economy in itself that allows, hopefully, you know, this transformation of, as you're saying, like really redistributing this labor and this work that needs to be done in
Absolutely.
in a reparative way.
In a reparative way, exactly.
So yeah.
Yeah, and for those of us to carry the responsibility.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In a reparative way, in a community way,
Mm-hmm.
in this way,
Yes.
this way. Andre, I was so looking forward to this session. This is our 10th session, so we have a little anniversary.
Oh, congratulations! I'm
Yeah,
glad. Wow, I'm glad I brought up the number 10 mark.
exactly. And I, you know, this as ever, I remember our conversations and how we could just keep going into the interstices, right, of these subjects. It's just really, really appreciated this conversation and seeing you again. Um, would you mind staying with me while I do the end of the show, and then we'll have our ask advice? Okay. So I do want to mention that Andre has a quite remarkable website. It's www.renegadepg.com. Is that right, Andre?
That's correct.
Yeah. And please go there, because there is a lot to learn about Andre, and to also see his works. He is a living artist in Brooklyn, someone to support, someone to find out more about, and perhaps someone to work with. I mean, he's,
Yes.
yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to say that on another note, Creative Vitality Jam sessions are now podcasts, and we have 2 new sessions a week, Wednesdays and Sundays. I will immediately send out notice when we upload this to the Creative Vitality Jam session YouTube channel. And along with that, in the box below of that current video, you'll actually see other information about upcoming theater and opera director out of the UK. I do want to say also, apart from our 10th anniversary, it is Father's Day. So I'm going to send out a huge, huge bucket of love to my own father, who supported me every step of the way. I love you, Dad. I am appreciative of all dads who have given support to their kids. So thank you. And I want to thank Gracie Spina, the young Jedi, co-producer, intern, assistant, who helps this program function. I want to say thank you to the resilient and gorgeous dance community that I am thankful to be part of every day. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Andre, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Keep reimagining creativity. I'll see you later. Bye.
All right. Take care.
You too.